There is nothing wrong with your radio.
Do not attempt to adjust the volume.
We are controlling the broadcast.
For the next hour we will control all that you hear.
You are about to experience the knowledge and insights of the Media Mothership.
Yes, you're now listening to Edge Radio 99.3 FM. This is Media Mothership. And as always, we're broadcasting out of Nipaluna, Hobart, Tasmania. This is episode 90. We've made it now to nearly 100. And on Media Mothership, we explore how media can shape our understanding of the world around us. We're streaming on edgeradio.org.au and on hopefully YouTube and Twitch. You know, last week it was just Twitch. And YouTube did not synchronize, so we'll see. Feel free to post a comment in the chat of either YouTube or Twitch. I reckon we're still only on Twitch for some reason. So you can go check us out on Twitch at least. And of course, my voice is belonging to me, Craig Norris, joined today my special guest again back by popular demand.
You lie. You lie.
Oh, I'm popular and I demand it. Ashley Remminga from the University of Tasmania.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. And last time we had you on looking at cosplay and transmisogyny and kind of gender-defining language.
Yep.
During the conversation after that show, I think we got to talking about Godzilla.
Yep.
And what more perfect timing than to do a bit of a deep dive into our experiences with Godzilla than now, because, of course, at the start of the month, November the 3rd, it was Godzilla Day.
Yeah.
Right? So many people might not know out there that every year on November 3rd, it's Godzilla Day. Do you know why it's November 3rd, Ashley?
It's the release of the original Godzilla.
Smashed it. Yes, that's right. Back in November the 3rd, 1954, the original Godzilla film came out. And of course, this year, 2024, is significant because it's the 70th anniversary of that original film having been screened. So there was a little bit of online action commemorating that. There were special screenings. I don't think there was anything locally in Hobart. Did you come across any Godzilla moments?
I didn't hear, but I know the big day they usually have like a special showing where they make their own original suit fighting things, and I think this year was a part 2, if I'm not mistaken.
Ooh.
So yeah.
I know there was a there's been a couple of announcements when I was looking at Godzilla news around this time. One was the director of Godzilla
minus one.
Yeah. -0, -1?
I think -1. It's what we should know this.
I know we literally looked at this before we went on air as well.
-1.
There we go. There it is. -1 is that he's confirmed he'll be doing a sequel.
Yes. -2.
-2. And there's this big fan theories about the where the leaping off point could be, and he confirmed one of the fan theories being this G cell idea that the female companion of the main character, what's her name, who we think dies, but then...
Mothra.
No,
wait, not Godzilla's wife. Sorry.
The human survivor that we think gets killed.
Yes.
Spoiler alert. Turns out the final scene doesn't, but she has a black mark. And the director has confirmed that this is linked to this idea of G cells, which now people are going crazy about because they're linking this to Godzilla monsters in the past, or kaiju in the past, that have been derived from Godzilla's cells, right?
Yeah.
So Biollante and Space Godzilla.
Yeah.
So some discussion about the next Godzilla film from Japan. This is not the US Godzillas, the Japanese one. Maybe bringing back Biollante.
I hope so. It's been too long.
Biolante's weird. I mean, we were talking off air about some of the research we did before today, and you mentioned looking at the derivation of some of these monsters, this kaiju. Did you look into Biollante?
It's a lot about genetic engineering. I mean, a lot of their origins also helps with understanding where they're from, but for Biollante, it was very much from a lot of genetic engineering and modification and the fear associated with that, and that's where it sort of came from.
Yeah. So that because I guess in universe narrative is that a mad scientist is bereaved at the loss of his daughter, splices together his daughter's cells, a rose or something, or a flower, and Godzilla, and creates Biollante. And of course, yeah, you're right. That's in conversation, because I'm sure around that time, this would be late 80s, early 90s, I want to say, or 90s, right? This would have been that moment.
Trying to think, I think it would have been in the 80s, because it swapped
Probably
over
the start of that cloning
79,
technology.
Yeah, so it would have been 80s.
And I think the design was fan based, right? They put out a competition for fans to create the design.
This.
I'm pretty sure it was Biollante which was originated from a fan design, which the studios had asked for people to submit their design ideas. I'm pretty sure it's Biollante. You can correct us in the comments. I'm going to make deliberate mistakes probably to actually get some comments happening.
Godzilla dies in every single movie.
Or interestingly, yeah. I mean, I remember going to back in. I was doing some research on Godzilla tourism. I wrote an article back in 2012, which I mentioned is no longer on the internet. So it was in the great University of Melbourne's academic publication Refractory. And I thought, I'll dig it up and I'll promote it in today's discussion. And it's gone. The Refractory journal seems to have disappeared. Again, SMS us on 0488811707. If you're a huge Refractory academic fan, let us know where the archive is.
Yeah, or if you're a Lost Media fan, This is Lost Media. Go looking for it.
Internet Archive, man. Where are you? So it's not there. So I've put it up on my blog, so you can check it out on Media Mothership now. And it was a research project I'd done looking at taking some of Matt Hill's ideas with cult media geographies, where he'd done research on X-Files fans, going to try and locate the shooting locations and locations for X-Files episodes. And what he found was they were replicating the narrative of X-Files, right? The detective work they were doing was like a character, Fox Mulder, Dana Scully from X-Files. So I was doing a similar type of pilgrimage, an interview with Godzilla fans back in 2011 and 12. So this was before it became big again, before the Garth Ennis stuff and so forth. He was the director, right? Garth something. Brooks. I can't remember. Anyway, the American relaunch of Godzilla. And so I went back in there and I found Godzilla's death's location. So in Ginza.
Oh, okay, yeah.
There was a smaller Godzilla statue. There's a much bigger one there now, but there was a smaller one back then, which commemorates in a tombstone-like fashion the death location of Godzilla from Godzilla Destroyer. It's, I forget the Godzilla vs. Destroyer one, where he gets completely killed. So Godzilla does die. You can do a kind of dark tourism to that site, and
the one when you mentioned tourism is in Shinjuku with the giant building with Godzilla peering over the top. That's amazing.
Toho Cinemas. So they have a fantastic multi-level hotel accommodation cinema complex there. You can go up to the top. It's well worth a pilgrimage every time. I've done it.
I've done it quite a few times.
And on the hour, it roars. Right, I'm sure it's only during working hours. So it roars. So you go up to the top, and you'll see a explosion of steam come out and lighting effects as Godzilla roars in the hour each hour. It is fantastic, and there's a cafe. You can get some Godzilla themed desserts, and it's a fun experience because yes, they've got a life size Godzilla head, of course, on top of the hotel cinema complex. So yes, that's a new Godzilla pilgrimage to make, and you can get Godzilla rooms, which I've never been able to pull off.
I've got to do this. I've got to do this.
Yeah, it's worth doing. I've been told. The photos look fantastic. So Yes, so we're going to deep dive into some of these pilgrimage experiences we've had as we've traveled to Japan, and our own experiences as lifelong Godzilla fans, and why it's significant, why it's a kind of useful character to unpack. But what we'll start with, well, we're trying to think of ways to start, and one way we're going to start is just by dipping into some sound effects, kind of facts about Godzilla. So this is from Cinefex, and it's their 7 Godzilla facts that will make you the king of the kaiju. So this came out 10 years ago, right? So this must have been during the new
Probably,
Godzilla film,
just as the
US
MonsterVerse, launch.
So a lot of it will probably be speaking back to those earlier Japanese Godzilla films. We'll find out. So what we'll do is we'll pause it and we'll unpack from our own skills and knowledge whether this is a significant Godzilla fact and if there's more behind it than they're saying.
Godzilla's iconic roar is one of the most recognizable sound effects in the history of movies. But most people don't know how the original Godzilla filmmakers actually achieved the sound.
Do you know this story?
I've heard this story, but I cannot remember it.
Oh, okay.
So this is going to be like, do I remember it as I listen on?
Because look, I mean, it is fascinating the Foley sound moment where people deconstruct, or they reveal the curtain behind the magic of cinema, and they say, you know, this was actually the watermelon, the sound of a watermelon. So what we're going to hear here, of course, we heard there the Godzilla roar, and the reality of how it was put together, of course, has nothing to do with. I think maybe they did. It'd be interesting to see if they refer to a real animal here. I know the main objects they use are not at all organic.
Was created by rubbing a resin-coated glove on the strings of a double bass. They then took the resulting sound and manipulated it in an echo chamber. Hey, filmmakers, an easier way to get that exact same sound?
Yep. So it's a cello and a leather glove soaked in resin, which seems to be a really kind of weird but necessary component, and then an echo chamber to create that sound. Here again.
Godzilla.
Yes, that's a cello with a glove.
It's incredible. It's like that story with Howl's Moving Castle with making the sound for that, but it was much different where they would just like go in a room to a bunch of tradies and do your thing. So
Howl's Moving Castle has this as its effect.
Yeah, so they just go to a bunch of tradies and say, go in there and do your thing. And they just use that to make the sound effects. So,
because of course, because what you need is a sound, particularly for, I guess, the Godzilla roar. We're setting up this idea of destruction, terror. You don't normally associate violin, cellos and gloves with it. But
I'm sure if you're a cello player, you would think rubbing like resin on it would be like the most evil thing ever, the most destructive way of treating your cello. So.
That is actually quite point. That's a good point, the destructiveness of that. All right, so the next fact that they'll discuss.
Let's get into our second thing that you didn't know today. Toho, the Japanese studio that created Godzilla, originally wanted to create the monster using stop-motion animation. That's the technique that had been used in King Kong 29 years earlier here in the US, and Toho figured, hey, it worked out pretty well for those guys. But Godzilla simply didn't have the budget for that. Instead, they went with the now classic method of putting a guy in a suit and having him destroy miniature buildings and cities. They even came up with a name for this method, Suitmation. Putting a guy in a rubber monster suit may seem cheesy to us now, especially once Godzilla started doing stuff like this. But, unlike...
Of course, yes. The suitmation stuff's really interesting, particularly the scene, unfortunately those people that aren't watching it can't see it, the scene where Godzilla dances in it. Which, I mean, that's that point at which Godzilla's becoming a children's character, almost. Never kind of convinces me, but it is interesting that they decided to go for suitmation rather than claymation.
Even though it's cheaper, I think it looks way better than the stop motion. I think it just looks so much more, I hate to say it, but realistic. And just, it looks smoother and everything. I think that's what really is so good about the suits, is that it looks a lot more organic than this like stop motion jittery movement.
And I wonder if part of that is also the kind of, at a very human level, we know it's someone destroying, right? So that idea that it vicariously makes us enjoy the destruction we're seeing because it's a real body in there.
Yeah.
And these are real miniatures that are then getting trodden on. And, you know, I mean, most people, when they talk about if they made model airplanes as a kid, about then the destruction of those models they would make. And I think there is something
there's that
taps into.
therapeutic, I think it's Buddhist sort of like teaching where you build something and then you destroy it, and it's like meant to be like therapeutic in that sense.
I could definitely, someone that collects too much crap. I'm absolutely convinced at the liberating power of letting go of possessions. What is it they say? You're possessed by your possessions. So I do think that, sometimes the destructiveness of Godzilla and the smashingness of it can be very liberating. And it has become distinct. I remember before the South Park creators did the Team America puppetmation thing.
Yeah.
They were talking about doing a suitmation piece instead.
I would love to see them come back now and do that, because I think that would be really interesting to see from them.
Because I'm pretty sure all of the modern versions of Godzilla have been CG. That suitmation aspect for it isn't there.
Yeah, well,
it could be like an Andy Serkis thing where it's modeled on a human performance, but then CG.
There was the Shin Godzilla had partial. And it wasn't a person necessarily in a suit, but they built actual like tails and things like that. But
kind of like Andy Serkis with Golem and the performance he gave, where it was a human's performance that then was captured and digitized. Yeah, so it still has that idea of performativity and expressiveness and acting.
Yeah. But I think I wouldn't be surprised if we do see a bit more going back a bit, because especially like with Marvel recently and their latest work being a lot more grounded in actual building the sets and everything, I could definitely see some of Godzilla going forward to be a lot more, I guess, hand-built almost, and that a lot more practical effects rather than all CG, because I think everyone who's seen all CG, if you don't give them the time and the budget, which blows out to be so much, it doesn't look real or doesn't look good. So, whereas this looks amazing, some of the older stuff.
So let's see, number 3. I think it's the actor that played Godzilla.
As long as we're talking about Godzilla actually being just some guy in a suit, you might as well know that in the original film from 1954, there were actually 2 actors who took turns in the Godzilla suit. Their names were Haruo Nakajima and Katsumi Tezuka. And even though both guys are uncredited in the film's credit sequence, they both appear in the film briefly as actual human dudes. That's Nakajima right there, and there's Tezuka. Now, if you're such a Godzilla geek that you actually know which guy is the one in the Godzilla suit in any given scene with the monster, congratulations on being King Dork, I guess.
It's funny they mentioned the Godzilla actors, because one of the things that got me into looking at Godzilla as a research piece was an article we'll play, or a video clip we'll play later on from Japanorama, and they bring in some of the Godzilla actors to perform a Godzilla destruction scene to help this local town city planner pitch his town to Toho cinemas. So the idea of the actors, and I think it's one of these things where, at the time the film came out, much like with, I guess, Frankenstein and Boris Karloff uncredited in the original Frankenstein film in the 1930s, but since became like a legend in horror. Boris Karloff can't be kind of removed from Frankenstein. Similarly with Godzilla, right? I mean, I think those actors that performed in the suits, I wonder how much of a celebrity they are, or if they're still unknown. It seems here they're unknown in terms of in the original film.
I've heard their names throughout, and I know they pop up here and there, and some do multiple series. So I think
You'd have to be a fan, though.
Yeah,
I
you would have
reckon,
to be. But then
know
again,
that level.
like, you know, I guess if you're a real fan of Godzilla and looking at it that deep, like maybe us, you know, we're not necessarily the most. I'm saying this in a nice way.
Yeah,
we're a bit more removed than the general population from enjoying Godzilla. So, yeah, I think you're right. You probably wouldn't know who they are.
I mean, if you went to a fan convention for Godzilla and a suit actor was there, it would be fascinating. I mean, the
That would be
discussion that
amazing.
he'd have and reveal. But it is a case of all of these masked villains. I mean, if you're thinking everything from Jason from the Friday the 13th films with the hockey mask, the Michael Myers killer from Halloween with the Captain Kirk mask, all of these masked performances, the guys in the suits are unknown, but then later on we'll have this second life within fandom and fan conventions where they'll be talking about the experience, they'll be in DVD features, they will have always been unrecognized. I mean, it's interesting.
Was it V for Vendetta where they actually never did reveal who it was, and there's still that sort of
I think it was
rumor?
always going to be Hugo Weaving, right?
Yeah,
think
I think Hugo Weaving did the voice, but I don't know if we ever found
really?
out who actually
He
played.
didn't perform. I just assumed it was Hugo Weaving
Yeah, no,
behind the mask.
I'm pretty sure it was V for Vendetta. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure there was the voice and the actor were different
Well,
people.
message us in the
Fact check
chat.
me.
There you
Fact
go.
check me. But yeah, I think we never found out who was in, and there's theories around who it could have been. So
Because it is one of those pathways that could be appealing to people to get a job. You perform as an extra in a film, and within that space, if you're a stunt person, obviously more likely to be a villain character. And you know, the recognition of it. I mean, it does feel like a really deep cut in terms of being able to know the actors that played these performances, and I think they're unrecognized. I mean, I think Andy Serkis and the challenge he had not being awarded for his performance as Golem in the Academy Awards, that there was no category in those Academy Awards when the first Lord of the Rings film came out to recognize actors that weren't performing as their, you know, bodies, I guess, but were performing as CG'd versions of those bodies. That's since been changed. I think there's now recognition for actors that are performing in these types of roles where they're...
honestly, it should be like best actor. Like for some of these people, like the stuff they do in these suits are utterly insane. Like they're better than most of these actors. They may not have any lines, but the way they move their
Oh,
bodies.
yeah, look, I mean, yeah, you got to be convinced. If you're watching Godzilla, you got to believe in Godzilla. And if the guy in the Godzilla suit... This is why that scene of him dancing in, like, Destroy All Monsters or whichever one it was from the 1960s just takes me out of the Godzilla universe, right?
It does, but then I was watching Godzilla, the 1984-5 one, the other day, the first one in the Heisei era, and I was like, whoa, this really, like, I can feel Godzilla. I know it's a guy in a suit, but gosh, this guy is incredible, like, for just drawing you in and that, so...
Yeah. If you can do a great performance in Godzilla, I think underappreciated act. So I think, interesting fact. Glad they included the Godzilla actors. Let's see what number 4 is.
After the first Godzilla was such a smash hit, Haruo Nakajima went on to play the monster all the way up to 1972's Godzilla vs. Gigan. He did share suitmation duty with Katsumi Tezuka and a couple other guys on a few sequels here and there, but Nakajima was definitely the Godzilla guy for almost 20 years. He's like the Jim Henson of Godzilla. I have no idea what that means, but damn, 20 years.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So good credit to go to a performance. And again, it would be interesting in Japan, because I know one of the things that's so fascinating about Japan is the recognition given to performances which are reasonably unheralded in the West. So voice actors, for instance, having celebrity status. Some of the really great voice actors in Japan having so much more kind of status than in the West.
Even like amateur idols and that as well. Yep. So like there's that sort of fandom and fan participation and appreciation that we don't necessarily give to these really talented individuals here.
Yeah, so I wonder if in Japan there's more recognized. I still think it's probably not recognized. I do feel like the Godzilla suit stuff. I mean, it seems like the recognition of voice actors is it's slightly more contemporary phenomenon than 1950s, 60s Godzilla suit performers. I kind of feel like that would still have been considered trash culture.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
All right, well, let's look at number 5.
The first Godzilla suit weighed over 200 pounds, and it was so hot inside that draining a cup of Nakajima's sweat from inside the suit was just another day at the office. He also fainted inside the suit several times. Nakajima says he even lost 20 pounds by the end of the shoot for the first film. Lucky for Nakajima, they improved on the suits with each movie. Most people don't know that up until 1984, each suit was made from scratch. And with each reconstruction, the design changed slightly, making Godzilla look different from film to film, which wasn't always a good thing.
Yeah, I've heard that the Godzilla suits are different. And when they've recycled the suits, like I think in Godzilla, the first Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla one, it's a really crappy suit. Right, that it's showing all the wear and tear, that the suits just don't really survive the end of a film.
Yeah, they're breaking down at the moment, and they're just falling apart. The latex used to make them are just degrading by now. So they're like,
certainly as collectibles. Yeah, I'd imagine those suits are. Yeah, you know, you can't preserve them.
No.
Really, the material just does deteriorate. And yeah, I've heard that the performance in these suits is just diabolical.
Further proves why they deserve more recognition.
Indeed, yes. It does excite the childish imagination to dress up as Godzilla, but yeah, I mean, to actually pull it off, those Godzilla suits. I have seen, like, at the when I was at Dragon Con, there was a full Godzilla cosplayer on the parade, the outdoor parade they did, and he did like you had to do a whole lap of the city in that Godzilla suit. Him and Ultraman performers. I think Ultraman had it easier.
Yeah, well, yeah.
The Godzilla suit.
I mean, if you're dressed up like Ultraman, though, maybe the Godzilla guy has it slightly easier.
I have seen when I went to see when I was living in Shibuya, I went to see the premiere of Godzilla vs. Megaguirus in the late '90s, and there they had a Godzilla suitmation performer come out as part of they had some of the cast, and they had this guy dressed up as Godzilla, and they had a I assume it was a fire extinguisher in the suit, because at certain points he'd be jettisoning out what looked like, a fire extinguisher kind of thing. But that, yeah, not easy.
No.
All right, number 6.
We can all agree that as Godzilla got more and more sequels and even an animated show, it got pretty stupid, especially when compared to the serious political nature of the original movie. That's right, the first Godzilla was actually about real issues, y'all. What you may not know is, it was actually nominated for Best Picture at the Japanese Movie Association Awards in 1954, which was basically the Japanese Oscars. The film lost to Seven Samurai, but it did win for special effects. The first Godzilla was the only one to ever be nominated for Best Picture, which is no surprise when you look at the later movies, because, I mean, what the f*** is this?
Godzilla says that I should learn to fight my own battles.
It's also more evidence of too many sequels often being the worst thing that can happen to a good movie.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a lot there. So I guess their argument here is, Godzilla in the 70s and 80s developed a reputation in Japan and the West as being kind of just for kids and being very dumbed down entertainment. But the first Godzilla film was really sober and serious. What's your feeling of that characterization?
I understand what they're saying, and I definitely think especially the Showa era got very cheesy towards the end. But there's also, so much representation of what the characters, each of the different kaijus represent, and some of the themes in even these quote-unquote stupid or silly ones. There's a lot of meanings that you can get out of the particular stories, whether it's religious fanaticism or political discourse, space exploration, and the fear of the unknown. You get so much out of them through what the other kaijus represent, and this overarching theme of Godzilla is still the worst because Godzilla represents, all this negativity of nuclear destruction and everything. So
yeah, I agree. Certainly the initial film's inception and the conversation it's having with World War II, which is still then only 9 years previous from that film coming out, and the fact that there was the classic story going on that not only had King Kong been released years before, which was a source of inspiration, but there was the case of the Lucky Dragon boat, which got caught up in nuclear testing, and some of the sailors were sick. So that idea of nuclear fallout still affecting Japan and causing death and suffering is very much in conversation. I think there's even that famous scene in the '54 Godzilla where you have Godzilla's rampaging through Ginza, and the buildings are collapsing around people, and they have this really sober scene of the mother and child saying, it'll be okay, soon we'll be with your father, as it's strongly implicated they die in the crushed walls that Godzilla just burst through from. So again, that conversation with the father, we assume, had been killed in the war as a soldier. So this. Well,
the 85 one, which is the first of the Heisei, so the second lot of Godzillas, it starts off with them on a boat, and that with Godzilla coming and most of the crew die from radiation.
Yeah.
So there's that direct parallels to
a real world
story.
So I always love, again, the cliche being the French discovering within Jerry Lewis films something redeeming. I do love redeeming trash culture. And I do think the world building that's going on in those very cheesy 70s Godzilla films are full of real interesting creativity. And the monster designs that are occurring, the kind of team-ups which are getting developed. You've got King Ghidorah, the three-headed golden dragon being.
Yeah.
Gigan, the kind of robot chicken.
He looks way cooler than what we're making out being a robot chicken. But
that's right. There's some really, really fascinating conversations it's setting up around the ideas of popular culture within Godzilla. And also, the fact that all these films involve the destruction of recognizable landmarks in Japan.
Yeah.
This fascinating destructiveness of these locations. I think really has some weight to it always. That kind of, once you're starting to destroy it, there's always something kind of tragic within that. I mean, the human B-plot stories, I think, always struggle. So it's interesting here at the moment, there's nothing about the human actors in conversation with these Godzillas texts. So let's see if the final one, Godzilla Effect number 7, develops anything unusual.
We've been talking about Godzilla a lot, but we haven't really talked about Godzilla. Like the actual word Godzilla. I'm doing air quotes around... No, wait, you can't see that. Never mind. See, Godzilla, or Gojira in Japanese, has a couple different rumors floating around as to how he got his name. As far as we can tell, this is the real story. The original filmmakers imagined a monster that was a combination of a gorilla, sort of like King Kong, and a whale. The Japanese word for gorilla is garira, and the word for a whale is kujira. Garira plus Kujira led them to Gojira, which in 1950s transliteration from Japanese to English became Godzilla. Even though the final design for the monster doesn't resemble a gorilla or a whale, they kept the name because they liked it. So Godzilla's iconic name is really just the result of happenstance and dumb luck. Cute story, happenstance and dumb luck are also how we came up with the name Cinefix. I'm kidding. We used a dartboard. That's it for...
Okay, Godzilla name. I know this is a classic kind of, so many different stories around it. What stories have you heard?
I've heard that one. That one is the main one that I've heard.
Gojira.
Yeah.
I think it's the nicest one in terms of it tells the best story of it. That it's the combination of these two, kind of clearly powerful entities, right? A gorilla, the go from Gojira, gorilla, and then Kojira, the whale. And it seems reasonable enough. But, the thing is that that it comes down to is that there's no agreement. Even the original production team dispute that that's the origin. Some people in that original production team saying it was the nickname of one of the gophers or people working on sets. His nickname was Gojira. So it's I think it's a bit of the magic of movie telling that they've chosen this as the best story to go ahead. I kind of suspect that the story's probably lame. Like the original story is kind of lame.
I'm almost certain it probably is, because I remember the reading that the first interpretation of Godzilla wasn't even going to be this like dinosaur reptilian creature, but going to be a squid. So,
yes, that's right. Yeah. There were various other original design sketches for Gojira. And, I think the Godzilla name's really interesting, then developing into that English term, Godzilla, right? Again, that in itself being such a powerful name that's come kind of in conversation with that Japanese Gojira into Godzilla. Is again, it just seems so perfect now looking back on it. It is one of those lucky names, I think, that has been bequeathed to this genre. So there's the 7, Godzilla facts. I thought the Suitmation stuff was the most interesting.
I think definitely just the sheer fact we never get to speak about their experience and all the difficulties they go through. It sort of, I guess, presents how impressive they really are for what they do.
Wow, 3 years later, 3 years ago, so this is 7 years after the top 7 list, Cineflix then does another list. They repeat some of them, but I do want to jump on some of their new ones that they've got here. So they do the Godzilla rubber costumes, the heavy suit again, Godzilla's new job. I'm wondering if this, because I haven't seen this yet, I'm wondering if this is the notorious moment he became Japan's ambassador.
Oh, right? Yes, I hope it is that.
Oof.
If not, we need to discuss that.
I mean, for me, the most interesting thing about the Japan ambassador thing was I was working with a colleague, Koichi Iwabuchi, back at the University of Western Sydney, and he later wrote this article critiquing Japan's soft power, and in particular pointing to the example of the kind of trivialization of citizenship in Japan by councils and prefectures awarding honorary citizenships to fictional characters, and saying it's so on the nose that Japan struggles to give citizenship to Zainichi and Korean-born Japanese, yet is more than happy to throw away citizenship as this promotional exercise for Godzilla. And we'll see if that's where it's going, and we'll do a bit of politics of identity on it. So this is Godzilla's new job.
With his imposing stature, menacing roar, and devastating atomic breath, Godzilla might not immediately strike you as the most welcoming guy. However, his long and illustrious career as a Japanese movie icon, albeit a dangerous and frequently incredibly destructive one, managed to land him official citizenship and tourism ambassador status in Shinjuku, Japan, around his 61st birthday in 2016. With those titles came some interesting new job responsibilities for Godzilla, including promoting the entertainment of and watching over the Kabukicho neighborhood, and also drawing visitors from around the globe in the form of the Godzilla head built atop the Shinjuku Toho building. Yes, there is now literally a gigantic Godzilla statue at the Hotel Gracery in Shinjuku, presiding high over the city, occasionally with glowing red eyes or smoke coming from his mouth, which is why you've never seen a real-life Mothra attack Japan. She's too scared. So congrats on becoming a citizen, Godzilla. Now can you stop wrecking the place?
There we go. Yeah, so indeed it was the Godzilla citizenship. I mean, there's so much to say about that. I automatically think, what popular culture characters could Australia give citizenship for, and how could that fail miserably?
Probably Bluey is our best shot. Maybe Blinky
yeah.
Bill.
Yeah. See, Blinky Bill, I think, because of its setting, I'd be fascinated to see if there's some kind of racial politics that don't translate nicely. Like, is the 1940s Blinky Bill? When did Blinky Bill come out, right? I kind of feel like Blinky Bill could be this White Australia Blinky Bill, right? It's kind of that.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. If you were doing a kind of retirement village of Australian pop culture characters, Blinky Bill, I kind of feel from the era that he was generated in, would be a bit of a White Australian.
My next thought was Nikki Webster, and then I went, wait, no, Nikki Webster's a real person. I was just thinking, like, what was that pop culture, like, early 2000, like, this symbol of stuff? I was like, Olympics, and then I just went straight to Nikki Webster, so...
But, okay, so in this case, this is indeed the notorious case of Godzilla getting citizenship. And for me, yeah, it was interesting at the time. I was thinking, okay, this is a very savvy, cool Japan move from Shinjuku Prefecture. They'd just invested all this money on the new Toho Hotel cinema complex, and so Godzilla symbolically is going to be this. What is he? He got citizenship, so he's a Japanese citizen, which is weird, isn't it? I mean,
I thought they've spent the last 70 years now trying to get Godzilla out of Japan.
Yeah. And then, of course, tourist ambassador, which makes some sense in terms of, certainly in terms of a literal sense. Yes, there's a lot of branding that links.
Yeah, if you look around, they've got Chibi Godzilla everywhere. I don't have my other laptop has Chibi Ghidorah on it, and
I even think when The Simpsons did a parody episode where they go to Japan, there's a joke at the end where they're flying off and Godzilla's there, destroying with Mothra. So yeah, it's a bit cliched there. Is this an example though of, because the date for that was 2016? I think that was announced, that citizenship, and so. We were talking there about where soft power, where did the fandom, Western fandom for Japan come in? And I want to say at least 16 years earlier than that, that kind of late 90s period where you had, or even 80s. I mean, I'd put it at Akira or these texts which became distinctly Japanese, being that first wave. There were... Monkey Magic beforehand. I mean, this is Iwabuchi's argument that really Japanese popular culture as an identity was actively downplayed by the Japanese entertainment industry through this Mukoku Seki idea that they were not seeing a kind of uniquely Japanese body or language as globally saleable. So instead it was Astro Boy, it was anything that could get dubbed and really be engaged with out of anywhere, right? You wouldn't really know Astro Boy's Japanese.
When you thought of Japan, you thought of refrigerators and cars and this sort of electronic devices for tech and that. And so Akihabara was very much all transistor radios and everything, and now it's all anime figures. And
it's difficult to remember this because now anime and this animation Astro Boy and so forth are so inherently seen as Japanese. It's difficult to remember what it was like, watching Japanese cultural content before the mid-90s, right? Before
I think it went
actively
even
promoted.
further. I don't think people even fully understood outside small communities that started seeing as cool until probably even around 2010 when the internet was really growing. Because I remember growing up and not knowing the difference of where Pokemon came from versus any other show that was airing at that time. I just thought, it's a cartoon. It's made in cartoon land. So
yeah, look at when I was doing my PhD in '96 on that early community's adaptation of that I guess later wave of anime, Akira on. There were still many participants I'd interview who were saying, their parents were the children of the World War II generation, and Japan just wasn't talked about at home.
Oh,
right?
yeah, no. My grandma still was like, I'm not sure because she lived through World War II, but I'm researching it. So
so there was a
generational trauma, generational shifts and identity.
so there was quite a stigma, I think, attached with it. So, I do think part of the and Godzilla is an interesting counterpoint to this, though, because Koichi's argument is that all of this, the reason why animation video games were so actively promoted, and Japan became the globally leading producer of animation in the 80s or 70s and 80s, was because it was an easy text to globalize and didn't have what they saw as a cultural discount of Japaneseness. But then you look at Monkey Magic and Godzilla, both of which have distinctly Japanese settings. While China for Monkey Magic, filmed in Japan, of course. Godzilla, though, filmed in Japan with Japanese actors. It is, if not in spoken words, very Japanese. Yet did become popular outside of that. And Samurai, like there was that Samurai series from the 70s.
Yeah, the one that beat Godzilla as well.
Beat Godzilla?
Yeah.
I haven't heard this.
Oh, no, the one they were discussing before, Samurai, I forgot the name, but the one that beat Godzilla for the award that it was nominated for, that was another one.
Oh, right, yes,
Yeah,
right. It was Seven Samurai.
Yeah, yes.
Kurosawa film. Right, yes. Thank you for remembering what we've just played on this very show.
Well, clearly not well.
So the samurai motif and a kind of idea in Japan. Well, you also had, most interestingly, Shogun in the mid-70s.
And now back again, winning all the awards.
So for many people, of course, in the mid-70s, that first falling in love with Japan was from reading James Clavell's 1970s book, Shogun. Interestingly, James Clavell himself, a survivor, a POW survivor from World War II, from Japanese torture. So again, this amazing convergence of these kind of, don't mention the war, don't mention that past, yet he wrote one of the books, which for many people was why they fell in love with Japan in the 70s. And as you're saying, was remade recently as a Netflix series, which has gone on to equal acclaim, has brought a new generation into that kind of samurai interest.
Yeah, I just think it's a bit late for them to be making Godzilla an ambassador, because I don't know if Godzilla has the level of cool that some of the like anime and idols. I think maybe Godzilla needs to form an idol group.
Well, it's an interesting time, 2016, because again, this was before the Western adaptations became popular.
Yeah.
So 2016 is such an interesting moment in Godzilla, because there hadn't been really any new Godzilla made for many years. It had just been ticking over with that kind of fan interest. So it is fascinating that they choose this rather old, nostalgic figure rather than an anime figure that would have been big in 2016.
Well, I still think
Dragon
we need
Ball.
to see Godzilla do an idol dance and performance, like full
Probably.
rubber suit.
Probably has. Be careful. Probably has.
Anyone listening,
Well, I guess
please
this
send it
is-
to us.
Yeah, and I guess this is what you're saying. That really is this a moment of selling out, right? That Godzilla, instead of being a disruptive entity, right, that initial Godzilla object in 1954 would have been so interesting, because part of it, while it was nominated for an Academy Award, Japanese Academy Award, which does indicate that it wasn't considered trash culture at that time, it was celebrated as serious movie making. Nevertheless, I think Godzilla would have been a divisive thing, right? Some parents would have seen it as just trash, particularly when it became more kind of commercial and mainstream. As well as it being a kind of a menacing, villainous character. So I think it is interesting that you could say quite rightly it's an indication of the co-option of Godzilla, the selling out of Godzilla as a disruptive entity and into a kind of, given soft power had already been ticking over in Japan for at least 20 years, it's interesting, how slow the wheels of government are to co-opt that in a way that makes them attempt to look good.
Well, that goes furthermore to the point that I disagreed with before, with the not having any sort of meaning. If you watch Shin Godzilla, it's all about that sort of critique of the government, and that during the Fukushima sort of fallout with that, and the horrifying earthquake and tsunami, the triple disaster.
And I think that would be a great contrast to make, right? The 2016 citizenship and Tourism Ambassador Award to Godzilla vs. Shin Godzilla.
Well, they came out 2016, both of them.
Right,
So,
I forgot the time. Right, yeah.
Maybe that was the true reason they made Shin Godzilla, was a critique of Godzilla getting ambassadorship.
Yeah, because they're two very radically different interpretations. You know, in one case, the government co-opting it and neutering it, and the other, you know, the kind of lampooning of the government's failure with Fukushima satire that's being done through Godzilla. Yeah, so clever. Any other thoughts? Well, here we go. So this is Godzilla vs. Evangelion, which is linked to Shin Godzilla. Of course, Shin Godzilla was directed by
Hideki Anno.
Hideki Anno?
Hideki Anno.
Anno, yep. From Evangelion fame. Is this the pachinko game? Or is this... Because I know there was a pachinko game that launched that combined Evangelion and Godzilla. And then And pachinko is interesting. Just one aside before we get to it. The thing that I find most fascinating about the pachinko industry in Japan was a discussion I had with a friend that works at Sega, and he was saying that a lot of anime will make their initial budget for creating the series from a limited pachinko release of that title. So, Star Blazers, for instance, Uchu Senkan Yamato, did a special pachinko release where you could only watch these kind of few minutes of this new Yamato series they were planning to make through pachinko. And of course, pachinko is a kind of soft gambling, and you're having to spend a lot of money on them. And through all the revenue that was made from these pachinko kind of slot machines, it was sufficient money to fund anime productions. I might be wrong with... No, I'm pretty sure that's
and we should mention, if you've got a gambling addiction, that you should definitely... there's a lot of helplines, and you should definitely seek help.
Yes, thank goodness Pachinko's not here.
Yes.
I think we have enough gambling issues. We've got about 5 minutes left. Well, okay, we've set up the Godzilla vs. Evangelion one, so we'll listen to this and have some final words.
Godzilla isn't the only towering, devastating force that has crushed Japanese cities to smithereens in pop culture history, of course. The massive robotic EVA units from Neon Genesis Evangelion have also been known to stomp through skylines fighting gigantic nightmare monsters. So, what do these two franchises have in common? Well, a lot, actually. 2016's Shin Godzilla was co-directed by Hideaki Anno and Shinji Higuchi, who had both previously collaborated on Evangelion. Plus, the film's music was composed by Evangelion composer Shirao Sakisu, who straight up remixed songs from Evangelion in Shin Godzilla. Additionally, the Universal Studios Japan theme park recently featured an Evangelion vs. Godzilla 4D interactive ride where audiences could be boots on the ground for a massive battle between Godzilla and an EVA unit. But, and this is a bonus thing, if you'd rather see these two iconic titans join forces on your desk instead of tearing each other apart at a theme park, feel free to drop $165 on this nearly 10-inch tall purple robot Godzilla snap-together model kit launching later this year. It's so cute. And scary.
Nice.
I'll be honest, I have thought about buying that.
So it's transmedia, right? I mean, it's the kind of spinning off of the Godzilla and Evangelion properties into these kind of third texts, a theme park CG ride that you can go on, which does look cool. Or, this hybrid model kit of Mechagodzilla in Evangelion coloring.
Yeah.
That does look cool.
Don't buy it. Save your money.
Well, sadly, we haven't even dived into the media tourism part, so we'll have to have you back to dive into this further. Any final thoughts about Godzilla? What would you recommend people watch if they're looking for a Godzilla fix?
I would definitely recommend the original. You can't go past the original, but...
Because we do have some box sets here. We've got the Heisei and Showa box sets that Madman released. Sadly, you were pointing out that they're no longer available.
Yeah, please bring them back. Please bring them back. I know you listen to us, so please bring us back.
Re-release it.
But I'd probably recommend. I love the Heisei era, but the Reiwa era is very accessible. Whether it's Shin Godzilla, Godzilla -1, maybe you're into the MonsterVerse, that's quite accessible out there. And the original you can't go past, but yeah, there's Godzilla has something for everyone. So if you watch a Godzilla and go, that was terrible, if you watch a different era, you might find exactly what you're after. So,
and there was one other. I've just noticed it. The manga that you've brought in. This is in the kaiju world. So it's the giant monster world. What's the thing about this manga?
So there's a number of manga series out there at the moment, actually publishing at the moment about kaijus, like Kaiju number 8, which is super popular Shonen Jump series. But the one I have is Kaiju Girl Caramelize.
Kaiju Girl Caramelize.
It is a super cute series. It's a shoujo romance series that focuses on a character that basically whenever her heart beats, she transforms into a kaiju, so like Godzilla, and destroys the town. And it's all about her trying to deal with her romantic feelings, understand her identity. And it's essentially like a magical girl show, but instead of transforming into a magical girl when her heart beats, she turns into Godzilla. So it's a story of love and romance and Godzilla. So what more could you want?
So she's normal size, Kaiju Girl Caramelized, but then she does become huge.
Yeah, so I won't ruin the story, but you find out around volume 7 a bit more about her past. But it is super cute, but yeah, she's essentially just a normal schoolgirl who has a crush on this guy, and whenever her heart beats too much, she transforms into a kaiju, a Godzilla, to destroy the town.
Why is Caramelize the name of the character?
No.
What's Caramelize about?
I think it's just meant to be like this sort of like cute moe sort of... I don't know the symbolism behind it, but it is it's just a really sweet series, and it's a series I think anyone of any age, you get characters that obviously this is very inspired by Godzilla. There's a character who cosplays different kaijus throughout, whether she's cosplaying the larvae of Mothra or the three-headed Ghidorah.
Cosplay as so
she's a fangirl of this kaiju, and so she starts cosplaying these other kaijus. But
I'd love to have you back on, because
Yeah.
one of the other spaces that I'm fascinated by is this moe space, particularly young girls transformed into kind of militarized objects. That kind of the strike witches.
Yeah,
kind
strike
of
witches,
thing.
and there's Girls on Panzer.
Right, Girls on Panzer, yes. This kind
and
of...
there was that battleship one as well.
Yeah. What is that?
I cannot... that one I won't...
Collection.
Collection.
It would be fascinating to look at this weird... because what would be the intended audience for Kaiju Girl Caramelized? Is it young girls?
It would be
shoujo?
A shoujo romance, so definitely a sort of a young sort of. I'd say it's not for I guess marketed towards masculine readers, but it is sort of it's got that element that makes it a bit zany, but it's all symbolic and that, and I absolutely adore this series, and I hope one day to be able to cosplay this series.
Oh, wow.
So, no, hopefully next time I can come on cosplay.
Yeah, no, you've heard it here. That'd be fantastic.
Oh gosh, I've set myself up too much.
We'll set up a Kickstarter for that. Send us in now. No, that's fascinating. All right, well, listen back into Media Motherships in future weeks, where we'll deep dive into some other weird obscurities in Japanese pop culture. Ashley, it's been absolutely fantastic having you on.
Oh, thanks for having me again.
If people want to find out more about what the work is you're doing, they can check it out on the UTAS website.
Yep, and I've now finally migrating over to Blue Skies, so you can find me on Ashley Remminga on Blue Skies.
What is Blue Skies?
Blue Skies is a replacement of a particular social media network
name?
that we won't name because...
Really?
But
Skies.
it's by the founder of what was known as Twitter, who basically recreated a site of his, but is not owned by a billionaire who is problematic at the moment.
Yeah.
So he's so it's over. I'm migrating over there at the moment. So I'm
Fascinating.
setting up. That seems to be where all the academics are going. So I'm going there too.
Good to know. All right. Well, we too will join that bandwagon from Media Mothership. So keep listening to Edge Radio. Coming up now, some really cool tunes. And if you're bored this weekend, then do whack on some classic Godzilla, or maybe check out Kaiju Girl Caramelize in manga form.